Typically, when we think of African American names, we think of names like DeMarcus, LaTanya, and Tayshawn. I'd always kind of frowned on those names until I had a conversation with Hunter, who'd been a friend of mine since we were kids. We were driving around Minneapolis, and somehow the topic of African American names came up. I expressed that I disliked them. Hunter, who's white, looked at me in disbelief. "You don't like those names? I think those names are awesome." Really? He explained that he connected those names with African Americans having to recreate a culture for themselves based on what was lost and what was forced upon them as a result of slavery. To him, those names represented making something productive out of a negative experience, while still sliding a subtle little F you into the dominant culture. Sort of like, I'm not naming my son Marcus, I'm naming him DeMarcus. Take that. I had never thought of these names as being symbols of empowerment or American innovation. You see, I was holding them to an arbitrary standard, comparing them to more mainstream names, and therefore, I was limiting my ability to see their full potential. Now, this seemingly small thing is actually indicative of a much larger truth that we all must know, both intellectually and spiritually. The United States of America is not synonymous with whiteness. Linking the two is detrimental to this country and the entire world. The United States is actually a model for a multicultural, global, inclusive society. That's who we are at our best. Unfortunately, at our worst, we are a hypocritical, bigoted empire that produces ongoing selfishness and greed. But what actually makes the United States truly special is we have members of virtually every ethnicity and culture around the globe in our population. But not only do we have that, we also have American versions of those same cultures. Slightly different from the originals, but with the same core attributes. But distinctly American because they evolved in a much more diverse society. We have Mexicans, and then we have Mexican Americans. We have Chinese and Chinese Americans. We have West Africans, and we have African Americans. What this means is the United States is essentially blessed with every talent, intellectual perspective, and mode of creativity known to humanity. But this vast wealth of human resources is going underused, simply because of what people look like, because of an arbitrary difference. I often wonder how productive me and my family could be if we didn't have to constantly protect ourselves from discrimination. Take my cousin Nicole, for example, seen in the middle of this photo. When she was in second grade, she was invited to a birthday party by one of her classmates. When her mother, who's black, came to pick her up, the little boy throwing the party said, "If I would have known you were black, I would have never invited you to my party." According to Nicole, she always has to be prepared for how people will change the way they treat her once they realize she is black. Just imagine how this can impact her ability to truly engage with other people. But why is someone like Nicole even black to begin with? Here in the United States, we have the history of the OneDrop Rule. This dates back to the 1600s, and it basically states that if someone has any amount of African ancestry, one drop of blood, then they're black, and consequently have fewer rights. The OneDrop Rule served to create a permanent caste system in our society based on the false concept of race. Financially, it allowed the offspring of any black people who were enslaved to be the property of the slave owner. Fast forward to the 21st century, and someone can essentially look like anything and be black in America. It's also not a huge stretch to see how the concept of the OneDrop Rule has spread to include any ancestry that is not European or white. Now, this could seem like an American problem, but the United States is still a global influencer. It's one of the few countries in the history of humanity to have the economic power, military power, technology, and influence through art and media to impact people around the globe. If we model a multicultural, inclusive, equitable society here, it will have global impact. Now, human beings have always separated themselves based on arbitrary hierarchies. We know that sexism, tribalism, religious discrimination all predate the concept of whiteness. But perhaps if we could deal with this issue of what people look like, we can have a ripple effect to impact our other more complicated social issues. What types of innovations, ideas, contributions to humanity are possible when we allow all of our citizens to foresee, fulfill, and share their full potential? What's possible when we move beyond such arbitrary definitions of who belongs and who doesn't? We resolve this by deciding that everyone belongs, that there is space for everyone to be a part of our community. This makes us more productive. This makes us more dynamic. So it is all of our duties as members of a great and powerful nation to make this a reality. It starts here. It starts now, for the good of this country and the good of the entire human race. Thank you.